My name is Matthew Reynolds, and at 35, I built my tech consulting company from nothing into $1 million business. For 7 years, I thought my marriage to Rebecca was as solid as my company's foundation. Then I found legal documents transferring ownership of everything I created to her, old friend, Thane. My entire life stolen with a signature. Instead of exploding, I stayed silent and started planning. The look on her face a week later was worth every second of restraint. Before I dive into my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to see how I turned this betrayal into my greatest comeback. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Chicago, the son of a factory worker father and schoolteacher mother. They instilled in me the value of hard work and education, but neither understood my fascination with computers and technology. My dad wanted me to get a real job at the factory after high school, but I had bigger dreams. I worked evenings at an electronics store to pay my way through college, earning my computer science degree while my classmates partied. After graduation, I bounced between tech support roles and IT consultancy jobs, living frugally in a tiny apartment with second-hand furniture. Every extra dollar went into my savings account, building the capital I needed to start my own business. While friends bought new cars and took vacations, I drove a 15-year-old Honda and worked 60-hour weeks, including weekends. By 25, I had $20,000 saved up, not much, but enough to take the leap. I rented a small office in a rundown building on the edge of the business district. The carpet was stained, the walls needed paint, and the bathroom was down the hall, but it was mine. I named the company Vertex Solutions, and spent 3 days designing a logo that looked professional enough for business cards. Those first months were brutal, cold calling potential clients, networking at every free event, and taking any job that came my way, no matter how small or tedious. 4 months in, I was down to my last $3,000 when I met Jordan Fuller at a local business mixer. He ran a mid-size manufacturing company and needed help upgrading their inventory tracking system. The job wasn't huge, but it would keep my lights on for another 2 months. I poured everything into that project, working 18-hour days to deliver something exceptional. When I finished 2 days early and under budget, Jordan was impressed enough to recommend me to 2 other business owners. Those referrals saved my company. Within 6 months, I had enough steady work to hire my first employee, an IT specialist named Daniel Owens who shared my work ethic and vision. We gradually built a reputation for solving problems other consultants couldn't fix. By my 30th birthday, Vertex had grown to a team of 12 specialists, and we moved into proper offices downtown. I met Rebecca Lawrence at a tech industry conference in Boston. I was there seeking new clients. She was representing a digital marketing agency. Rebecca was stunning, tall, blonde, confident, with a sharp wit that matched her business acumen. When she approached our booth, I stumbled over my words like a teenager. She laughed, not unkindly, and asked if I could explain our services over coffee. That coffee turned into dinner, which turned into breakfast the next morning. Our long-distance relationship lasted 6 months before Rebecca relocated to Chicago, taking a position with a local marketing firm. Her expertise in digital marketing perfectly complemented my technical knowledge. She understood branding and client relationships in ways I never had, and would often review my proposals, improving the language and presentation. With her guidance, our close rate on new business jumped from 60 to 85%. After dating for 18 months, I proposed during a weekend trip to Lake Michigan. We married in a ceremony that was more lavish than I would have chosen but exactly what Rebecca wanted. The honeymoon in Bali was perfect. 10 days of disconnecting from work and focusing solely on each other. When we returned, Rebecca suggested she could help modernize Vertex's marketing approach in her spare time. Her initial involvement was casual, redesigning our website, creating better promotional materials, and managing our social media presence. The results were immediate: more inquiries, better quality leads, and an enhanced professional image. Impressed by her impact, I encouraged her to take a more active role. Within a year, she left her job to become Vertex's official marketing director. Rebecca's influence extended beyond marketing. She identified inefficiencies in our operations, suggested new service offerings, and helped restructure our client onboarding process. Our revenue doubled within 18 months. As her responsibilities increased, it made sense to add her name to the company's legal documents, giving her signing authority for contracts and financial matters. I never once questioned this decision. She was my wife and partner in every sense. 5 years after starting Vertex, we landed our biggest client, Westbrook Industries, a national manufacturing corporation needing complete IT infrastructure modernization. The 3-year contract was worth more than all our other clients combined. We expanded again, moving to premium offices in a downtown high-rise and growing our team to 35 employees. Industry recognition followed, including a prestigious Innovator of the Year award that featured us in national business publications. Through it all, Rebecca was by my side, celebrating our successes and helping navigate challenges. I trusted her completely with every aspect of our business and life together. She managed our finances, maintained client relationships, and handled legal matters while I focused on service delivery and technical innovation. We were, I thought, the perfect team, professionally and personally. Each night, we'd have dinner together and share the day's achievements and obstacles. We'd brainstorm solutions, plan expansion strategies, and dream about the future. We talked about starting a family once the company reached a certain size. We discussed opening offices in other cities. We imagined growing old together, eventually passing the business to our children. I never once suspected that while I was planning our future, Rebecca was plotting something entirely different. The first subtle shift occurred during our 7th year of marriage. Rebecca mentioned reconnecting with an old college friend named Thane Garrett who had recently moved to Chicago. According to her, they briefly dated before going their separate ways, but had remained casual friends. When she suggested inviting him over for dinner, I didn't think twice about it. Thane arrived at our home with an expensive bottle of wine and a charming smile. Tall, athletically built, with perfectly styled hair and a custom suit, he looked like he'd stepped out of a luxury magazine. His handshake was firm, his eye contact unwavering. He ran a business consultancy specializing in corporate restructuring, adjacent to our field but not directly competitive. Throughout dinner, I noticed how Thane focused intently on Rebecca, laughing at her jokes, referencing shared memories, and complimenting her business acumen. He asked polite questions about Vertex but seemed to steer the conversation back to Rebecca whenever possible. I dismissed the initial discomfort as normal jealousy. After all, they had history, and Thane was undeniably charismatic. "You've built something impressive here, Matthew," he said while examining our awards displayed in the living room. "Rebecca always had an eye for potential. Clearly, she saw it in you." The comment struck me as slightly backhanded, but Rebecca beamed at the compliment. After Thane left, she talked about him enthusiastically, mentioning how well he'd done for himself and how valuable his network might be for Vertex. I agreed noncommittally, more interested in getting to bed after a long day. Over the next few weeks, Rebecca's behavior subtly changed. She began taking more work calls in private, stepping onto our balcony or into another room when her phone rang. Her wardrobe underwent a gradual upgrade, more designer labels, higher heels, more flattering cuts. When I complimented a new dress, she casually mentioned that Thane had recommended the boutique. Rebecca's business meetings started running later into the evenings. Twice weekly dinners became the norm, always with important clients or potential partners that somehow never included me. When I suggested joining one of these meetings, she became defensive, claiming I would be bored by the marketing discussions. "You hate these networking events, Matt," she said dismissively. "Besides, someone needs to focus on the technical side while I handle the relationships." The password on her phone changed. When I asked about it, we'd always known each other's passwords before. She claimed the company's IT security policy required regular changes. As the owner and technical lead of a cybersecurity company, I knew this wasn't our policy, but I let it slide, not wanting to seem controlling. 3 months after Thane's appearance, Rebecca suggested bringing him on as a consultant to help optimize our business structure for potential expansion. I expressed hesitation, pointing out that we already had systems that worked well. That's exactly the problem with tech people. She sighed with uncharacteristic condescension. You get attached to systems instead of seeing opportunities for improvement. Thane has helped companies triple their valuation before acquisition. Are we preparing for acquisition? I asked, surprised by this new direction. Not immediately, but shouldn't we maximize our options? She countered smoothly. Besides, his fee is reasonable, and he can provide valuable perspective as an outsider. Against my better judgment, I agreed to a 3-month consulting arrangement. Soon after, Thane became a regular presence in our offices, always impeccably dressed and armed with presentations full of business jargon and colorful charts. Employees seemed impressed by his confidence and executive presence. He established himself in our conference room, requesting access to our financial records and client contracts for his analysis. Rebecca and Thane began holding closed-door meetings without me. When I questioned this, Rebecca assured me they were just brainstorming sessions that didn't require my technical input. We'll bring you in once we have concrete proposals, she promised. Those proposals never seemed to materialize. While reviewing our monthly financials, I noticed small discrepancies, consulting expenses that hadn't been fully documented, client payments deposited later than usual, new business accounts opened without my knowledge. Each individual item could be explained away, but collectively they formed a pattern that made me increasingly uneasy. During a rare evening when Rebecca was home for dinner, I tried to discuss my concerns. The conversation quickly escalated into our first major argument about Thane's role. You brought him in without consulting me, you're having private meetings I'm not invited to, and now there are financial irregularities I can't explain, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Rebecca's face flushed with anger. Financial irregularities? Are you accusing me of something? After everything I've done for this company? I'm not accusing anyone. I'm saying we need transparency. This is just paranoia, Matthew, she interrupted. You're jealous of Thane because he understands business strategy in ways you don't. Not everything needs your technical analysis. Sometimes you need to trust the experts. The argument ended with Rebecca storming out to get some air. She returned hours later, refusing to say where she'd been. Emily Parker, my executive assistant who had been with Vertex since nearly the beginning, tentatively approached me the following week. She closed my office door before speaking. I don't want to overstep, but something doesn't feel right with the Thane situation, she said quietly. He's been asking for access to our client contracts and intellectual property documentation. When I asked Rebecca about it, she told me to provide whatever he needs without questioning. I assured Emily she'd done nothing wrong by informing me, but I downplayed my concerns, not wanting to create office drama. Despite the growing knot in my stomach, I convinced myself I was overreacting. Rebecca had helped build Vertex. She wouldn't do anything to damage it. My college friend Nathan Bennett, now a successful venture capitalist, visited Chicago for a conference and suggested meeting for drinks. As we caught up, I mentioned Thane's consulting role, attempting to sound casual. Nathan's expression grew serious. Be careful with sudden new advisors getting close to your business, especially ones with personal connections to your spouse. I've seen similar situations turn ugly. Make sure your legal protections are solid. I laughed off his warning, but his words lingered in my mind long after our meeting ended. The first concrete evidence appeared accidentally. Rebecca was in the shower when her phone chimed with a text message on our bedside table. Glancing over, I saw Thane's name and a preview. Can't wait to see you tonight. Reservation confirmed at our usual. The message could have been innocent, a business dinner, perhaps. But the phrase, our usual, suggested regular private meetings I knew nothing about. For the first time, I deliberately invaded Rebecca's privacy, picking up her phone only to find it locked with the new password. A few nights later, I woke at 3 a.m. to find Rebecca's side of the bed empty. Following the sound of hushed voices, I stood silently outside our home office door, listening to Rebecca's whispered phone conversation. He doesn't suspect anything. No, the paperwork is proceeding. We just need a few more weeks. I promise it will be worth the wait. When she returned to bed, I pretended to be asleep, my mind racing with possibilities, each worse than the last. The next day, while looking for stamps in Rebecca's desk drawer, I found a receipt from the Lakeside Hotel, a luxury property downtown, dated 3 weeks earlier, when Rebecca had supposedly been at a marketing conference in Minneapolis. The receipt showed charges for room service dinners for 2 and an overnight stay. When confronted, Rebecca claimed the conference had been cancelled last minute, and she'd taken the opportunity for a personal retreat, to work on business strategy without distractions. When I asked why she hadn't mentioned this change of plans, she accused me of monitoring her movements and not trusting her judgment. I'm working myself to the bone for our company, she said tearfully. I didn't realize I needed to report every decision to you for approval. The performance was convincing, but a line had been crossed. That evening, after Rebecca left for another client dinner, I began systematically reviewing our company's financial records, going back 6 months. What I found turned my unease into alarm. Small amounts had been consistently transferred from our main business account to a new operating account I hadn't authorized. Vendor payments had been rerouted, client retainers deposited into unfamiliar accounts before being transferred to our primary business accounts, always in full, but with delays that wouldn't be noticeable unless you were specifically tracking them. In our company email server, I discovered a folder of communications between Rebecca and Thane that had been deleted from her inbox but remained in system backups. The exchanges began innocuously enough with business discussions but gradually evolved into something more personal, and eventually explicit. More disturbing were the conversations about Vertex. Matthew is completely focused on the technical side. He has no idea what's happening with the business structure. The transfer needs to happen incrementally. He trusts me completely with the paperwork. Once it's done, we'll have 6 months to transition clients before he even realizes what's happened. My hands shook as I read message after message detailing their relationship and plans for my company. Still, I needed absolute confirmation. Using a business contact, I hired a private investigator, telling him only that I suspected financial impropriety involving my company. 3 days later, the PI delivered a sealed envelope to my office. Inside were photographs of Rebecca and Thane entering and leaving the Lakeside Hotel together, dining at restaurants across town, and kissing in his car outside our office building. The final photos showed them meeting with a man the PI had identified as Leonard Walsh, an attorney specializing in business acquisitions and restructuring. With concrete evidence in hand, I searched our home office thoroughly while Rebecca attended a charity gala with colleagues. Behind a false panel in her filing cabinet, a hiding place I wouldn't have discovered if not specifically looking, I found a folder of legal documents. The contents hit me like a physical blow. Transfer of ownership agreements, signed by Rebecca using the authority I had legally granted her, gradually moving controlling interest in Vertex Solutions to Thane's holding company. Client contract amendments listing his company as the service provider. Intellectual property assignments transferring our proprietary software and methodologies. The documents were crafted cleverly, using legitimate business purposes as justification, expansion funding, strategic partnership, risk management, while actually stripping me of everything I had built. According to the paperwork, Thane now legally owned 51% of my company, with the remaining transition scheduled to complete within 3 months. Rebecca had signed everything, using the broad authority I had given her years ago when I thought we were partners in every sense. I sat on the floor of our home office until sunrise, surrounded by evidence of the ultimate betrayal. My first instinct was to confront Rebecca immediately, to scream and rage and demand explanations. I imagined throwing the documents in her face when she returned home, forcing her to admit what she'd done. But something deeper inside me, perhaps self-preservation, perhaps calculation, counseled patience. Confronting her now would only warn them both, giving them time to accelerate their plans or cover their tracks. They believed I was oblivious. That misconception was now my only advantage. The physical toll of discovery was immediate and severe. I couldn't eat, losing 7 pounds in 5 days. Sleep became impossible without medication. I would catch myself staring blankly at walls, replaying memories of our relationship and business partnership, reinterpreting every interaction through this new, terrible lens. Moments I had treasured: Rebecca surprising me with champagne after landing the Westbrook contract, her supportive embraces during challenging projects, our late-night strategy sessions curled together on the sofa, now seemed like performances designed to maintain my blind trust while she plotted with her lover. Had any of it been real? Had she ever loved me, or had I simply been a convenient stepping stone for her ambitions? These questions tormented me through sleepless nights and distracted days. My entire identity had been built around 2 core beliefs: my marriage and my company. Both were now revealed as elaborate illusions. Despite the personal collapse I was experiencing, I maintained a calm facade at work and at home. When Rebecca asked about my weight loss and obvious exhaustion, I blamed a difficult technical integration project. She accepted this explanation easily, perhaps relieved not to discuss our increasingly distant relationship. The ease of her deception only confirmed what the evidence had shown. The woman I had loved and trusted completely was capable of extraordinary betrayal without a flicker of remorse. For 3 days after discovering the truth, I was paralyzed by alternating waves of rage and despair. I imagined confronting them both, perhaps violently. I considered emptying our accounts and disappearing to start over somewhere new. I even briefly contemplated self-destructive options that would at least end the constant pain of betrayal. What stopped me was the realization that immediate reaction, however satisfying in the moment, would ultimately give them what they wanted. They would play the victims, portray me as unstable or abusive, and cement their control over everything I had built. The only path forward required strategy, not emotion. I began compartmentalizing my feelings, channeling the pain and anger into focused planning. During days at the office, I maintained a perfect facade of normalcy, continuing technical work while secretly gathering information. At home, I performed the role of distracted husband, too absorbed in work to notice Rebecca's increasingly transparent lies about her whereabouts. My first call was to Carlos Martinez, an attorney friend who had helped with Vertex's initial business formation. I met him at a coffee shop far from our usual haunts, bringing copies of the most damning documents. "This is sophisticated," Carlos said after reviewing the paperwork, genuine shock evident in his expression. "They've exploited every authority you granted Rebecca to systematically transfer control without triggering review clauses. From a strictly legal perspective, it appears they've created a situation that would be extremely difficult to unwind through courts. What are my options?" I asked, voice steady despite the churning in my stomach. "Litigation would be lengthy, expensive, and public. They could argue you were aware of these transfers since your signature appears on the original authorizations giving Rebecca this power. Courts typically favor documented agreements over verbal understandings between spouses." He hesitated before continuing. "There's also the personal fallout to consider. Do you want the details of your marriage and its breakdown publicly dissected in business circles?" The answer was clearly no. Carlos suggested we meet with Harold Wilson, a financial advisor specializing in business disputes. Harold's assessment was equally sobering. "The company structure has been compromised, but your personal assets remain somewhat protected," he explained during our confidential meeting. "The question now is whether you want to fight for the existing business or salvage what you can and rebuild." Fighting meant years of legal battles, draining resources, and living in perpetual conflict with Rebecca and Thane. Rebuilding meant starting over after 7 years of marriage and a decade building Vertex. Neither option seemed remotely fair, but only one offered a path forward without remaining shackled to betrayal. I also began seeing Dr. Samantha Klein, a therapist specializing in betrayal trauma, meeting during lunch hours in an office building far from Vertex. These sessions provided critical emotional stability as I navigated the most challenging period of my life. What you're experiencing is a profound violation of trust on multiple levels, Dr. Klein explained during our second session. The personal and professional betrayal creates a perfect storm of trauma. Your impulse to react dramatically is natural, but your instinct to plan strategically is self-protective and ultimately healthier. With professional guidance establishing parameters, I developed a comprehensive exit strategy. The first step was creating a new business entity, Reynolds Technical Solutions, registered under my name alone. I secured a small office space with a 6-month lease, paying in advance to avoid financial trails. Next came the delicate process of securing client relationships. The Westbrook Industries contract represented 60% of Vertex's revenue and was personally managed by Connor Williams, a straightforward executive who valued our technical expertise. I requested a private lunch with Connor, ostensibly to discuss upcoming project phases. "I'll be direct, Connor," I said once we were seated in a private dining room. "I'm planning to leave Vertex for personal and professional reasons. Before making any announcements, I wanted to speak with you about ensuring continuity for Westbrook's projects." Connor studied me carefully. "This is unexpected. Your team's work has been exceptional. The technical team you've been working with will be joining my new venture," I explained, careful to avoid disparaging Rebecca or Vertex directly. "I can guarantee the same quality and personnel you've come to trust, just under a different company name." I then showed him selected documents, nothing that would violate confidentiality agreements, but enough to demonstrate the unstable situation at Vertex. Connor, a veteran of corporate politics, immediately understood the implications. "I appreciate the advance notice," he said finally. "Westbrook contracts with specific vendors because of the people involved, not company names. Send over the paperwork for transferring our service agreement to your new entity, and we'll review it expeditiously." With Westbrook tentatively secured, I discreetly approached the key technical team members who had been with me from early days. Daniel Owens, Emily Parker, and 4 senior engineers listened solemnly as I explained my departure plans in the conference room of a hotel, after hours. "I can't share all the details, but Vertex is undergoing ownership changes that I believe will negatively impact our work culture and project quality," I told them. "I'm starting a new venture and would value having you with me, though I understand if anyone prefers to stay." To my profound relief, all 6 immediately confirmed they would join me. "We came to work for you, Matt, not the company letterhead," Daniel said, speaking for the group. "Just tell us when and where." The financial preparations were methodical. I documented every personal asset and carefully separated them from business holdings. Our prenuptial agreement, which Rebecca had readily signed when she had less money than I did, protected my pre-marriage savings and personal investments. I opened new individual accounts at different banks and transferred my protected assets incrementally to avoid triggering alerts. For 2 weeks, I lived a double life. Outwardly the same dedicated technical founder and increasingly distant husband, while systematically preparing for complete separation from both roles. The strain was immense, but each completed preparation strengthened my resolve and diminished the power of their betrayal. The final component was personal extraction. I secured a furnished apartment under a corporate lease through Reynolds Technical Solutions. Over several days, when Rebecca was conveniently working late, I removed personal items that held sentimental value, family photographs, my grandfather's watch, irreplaceable mementos from my life before Rebecca. I left designer clothes and luxury items we had purchased together during our marriage. Material things could be replaced. My independence and self-respect could not. Executing my plan required perfect timing and emotional control. Each morning, I maintained the routine Rebecca and I had established years ago: coffee together before heading to separate cars for our commute. She increasingly filled these brief interactions with fabricated stories about marketing initiatives and client meetings, while I nodded with convincing interest. At Vertex, I continued leading technical implementations while quietly transferring my personal files and notes to external storage. I documented current project statuses and created transition guidelines for clients who would be coming with me. In meetings with Rebecca and Thane, I participated with just enough engagement to avoid suspicion, watching with detached fascination as they exchanged meaningful glances when they thought I wasn't looking. Thane had become increasingly comfortable in his presumed victory, often making thinly veiled comments about exciting changes coming to Vertex and new leadership directions. His confidence reinforced my commitment to the plan. While they plotted the future they thought was guaranteed, I methodically dismantled their foundation. The Westbrook contract transfer proceeded smoothly, with Connor Williams maintaining absolute discretion. The paperwork was prepared by Carlos but held for execution until my official resignation. 5 other significant clients with whom I had personal relationships were approached similarly, with 4 agreeing to follow me to the new company. Together, these accounts represented 70% of Vertex's annual revenue. My loyal team prepared for transition without raising alarms. They updated resumes, secured personal items from the office, and documented their current projects, all while maintaining normal work patterns. We established a communication protocol using personal email addresses and scheduled our coordinated departure for maximum effect. 2 days before my planned exit, I completed moving into my new apartment. The space was smaller than the luxury home I shared with Rebecca, but the simplicity felt cleansing. I arranged my essential belongings, set up a functional home office, and stocked the kitchen with basics. The lack of pretense in performance was immediately liberating. The final night in my marital home was surreal. Rebecca suggested we order dinner from our favorite restaurant, perhaps feeling some unconscious awareness of impending change. We ate in our formal dining room, making small talk about inconsequential matters while the weight of unspoken truths hung between us. "You've seemed distant lately," she observed, studying me over her wine glass. "Is everything all right with the Westbrook implementation?" "Just focused on making sure everything runs perfectly," I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "You know how I get when we're in critical project phases." She accepted this explanation easily, having heard similar ones throughout our marriage. After dinner, she received a work emergency call that required her immediate attention. I wished her luck resolving the issue, knowing she was meeting Thane, but no longer caring enough to confront the lie. After she left, I wrote a simple note and placed it with my wedding ring on her pillow. "I know everything. Goodbye, Rebecca." In the home office, I left printed copies of key documents I had discovered, including photos from the private investigator. There would be no ambiguity about why I had left, or what I had learned. The morning of my resignation, I arrived at the office early, dressed in my best suit. I placed sealed envelopes containing formal resignation letters on the desks of each board member, including Rebecca and Thane. At 9 o'clock, I sent an email calling an emergency executive meeting for 9:30, citing urgent business matters requiring immediate attention. The conference room filled quickly with curious executives and board members. Rebecca entered last, with Thane following close behind, both looking mildly annoyed at the unscheduled interruption to their day. Neither had been to their offices yet to find the resignation letters. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," I began calmly. "I've called this meeting to announce my immediate resignation from Vertex Solutions, effective today." The room fell silent. Rebecca's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. Thane maintained better composure, though a muscle twitched in his jaw. "This decision wasn't made lightly, but circumstances have made it necessary," I continued, maintaining direct eye contact with Rebecca. "I've prepared transition documents for all current technical implementations, which Emily will distribute. My personal items have already been removed from my office, so there's no need for the usual exit procedures." "This is completely unexpected," Rebecca said, finding her voice. "I think we should discuss this privately before making any announcements." "There's nothing to discuss," I replied evenly. "The decision is made and the paperwork filed. As you'll find in your resignation letters, I've also accepted positions from Daniel, Emily, and 4 senior engineers who will be joining my new venture." Thane leaned forward, his confident facade cracking slightly. "You can't just walk away and take staff with you. There are non-compete clauses, confidentiality agreements, all reviewed by legal counsel and found inapplicable under the circumstances. I interrupted. I believe you'll find everything is in order, though your attorneys are welcome to contact mine if there are questions. Rebecca stood abruptly. Matthew, we need to talk about this. Now. I don't believe we do, I replied, gathering my notes. I think we've both said everything that matters through our actions. I wish you and Thane success with the company. It's yours now, after all. The confusion on the faces of other executives made it clear they were unaware of the ownership transfers. Rebecca flushed deeply, realizing the implications of my statement. To the rest of the executive team, it's been an honor working with you, I concluded. I've valued our time together and wish you all continued success. With that, I walked out of the conference room and Vertex Solutions for the final time. Behind me, I could hear the eruption of questions and Rebecca's increasingly flustered attempts to control the situation. By the time I reached the elevator, Emily and Daniel were beside me, along with the other resigning team members, all carrying small boxes of personal items. Perfect timing, Daniel commented quietly as the elevator doors closed on our past and opened toward our future. That afternoon, I activated Reynolds Technical Solutions officially. We gathered in our modest new office space, arranging desks and setting up equipment. There was nervous energy but also excitement, the feeling of building something authentic again. By evening, we had a functional workspace and had contacted all transitioning clients to ensure smooth handover. When I returned to my new apartment that night, I had 37 missed calls and 22 text messages from Rebecca. I ignored them all, poured a glass of whiskey, and for the first time since discovering her betrayal, allowed myself to feel the full weight of grief for what had been lost, and the first glimmers of hope for what might still be built. The aftermath of my departure unfolded more dramatically than even I had anticipated. Rebecca's first messages were demanding and angry, accusing me of sabotage and unprofessional behavior. By evening, the tone shifted to confusion and desperation. Please call me. We need to talk about what you think you know. Whatever you found has been misinterpreted. There are explanations for everything. You can't just disappear like this. We built this life together. I maintained absolute silence, focusing instead on establishing operations at Reynolds Technical Solutions. The team worked with remarkable efficiency, motivated perhaps by the unusual circumstances of our fresh start. By the third day, we had functioning systems and were actively servicing transferred clients. On day 4, Rebecca found my new apartment. How she located me, I never discovered, perhaps through mutual acquaintances or a private investigator of her own. She pounded on the door during dinner, calling my name loud enough for neighbors to hear. Through the peephole, I could see her normally perfect appearance was significantly disheveled, hair uncombed, minimal makeup, clothing wrinkled. I didn't open the door, and after 15 minutes of increasingly desperate pleas, she finally left. That night she sent a single text. I at least deserve the chance to explain. Please. I continued focusing on rebuilding. Connor Williams from Westbrook Industries visited our new offices, nodding with approval at our streamlined operation. Sometimes smaller means more agile, he observed. The corporate bloat at Vertex was becoming noticeable in recent months. 1 week after my departure, the first major consequence hit Vertex. A formal letter from Westbrook Industries terminated their service contract, citing the significant personnel changes as justification for invoking their key person clause. The letter had been carefully worded by Westbrook's legal team to be unassailable. Through industry contacts, I learned of the panic this caused. Westbrook represented over half of Vertex's revenue stream, and their departure put the company in immediate financial jeopardy. Other clients began questioning the stability of the company, especially after learning of the mass exodus of senior technical talent. Rebecca and Thane attempted damage control, scheduling emergency meetings with major clients to reassure them. Their efforts were undermined by their lack of technical knowledge. They could promise continued service quality but couldn't answer specific implementation questions that clients raised. Emily received calls from former colleagues describing chaotic conditions at Vertex. Thane tried leading a technical review meeting yesterday, one developer reported. He couldn't explain basic aspects of the Westbrook architecture. Clients are getting nervous. By the second week, 3 more significant clients had terminated their contracts, citing similar concerns about continuity and expertise. Vertex's stock price, which had been climbing steadily during Thane's consulting period, dropped 30% in 5 trading days. Reports filtered back that Thane was increasingly placing blame on Rebecca for not handling the Matthew situation properly. According to office rumors, they had explosive arguments behind closed doors, with Thane's true character emerging now that the pressure was mounting. "You said he was completely oblivious," Thane reportedly shouted during one particularly heated exchange overheard by staff. "Now we're hemorrhaging clients because you couldn't keep your husband in check?" Rebecca made increasingly desperate attempts to contact me, through friends, family members, even showing up at our new office location. I maintained firm boundaries, having instructed building security not to allow her access and declining all communication attempts. On day 17 after my departure, Vertex's board of directors called an emergency meeting to address the company's rapidly deteriorating situation. Through a sympathetic board member, I learned that Thane had presented a recovery plan that primarily involved selling company assets to cover immediate liabilities, essentially dismantling what remained of my creation for parts. Rebecca apparently objected to this approach, leading to another public disagreement that further undermined confidence in the leadership team. 3 board members resigned immediately following the meeting, citing irreconcilable strategic differences in their public statements. 21 days after my resignation, Rebecca finally tracked me down at a coffee shop near my new office. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and a defeated posture that contrasted sharply with her formerly confident bearing. 5 minutes, she said, sliding into the chair across from me without invitation. "That's all I'm asking for." Against my better judgment, I stayed. 4 minutes and counting, I replied, checking my watch demonstratively. "Everything's falling apart," she began, voice trembling slightly. "Westbrook is gone, Anderson and Pierce terminated yesterday, and the board is turning against us. Thane is talking about selling off the intellectual property and dissolving the company." I sipped my coffee without responding. "I know you found the transfer documents," she continued hurriedly. "But you don't understand the context. Thane convinced me it was a restructuring strategy to optimize for eventual acquisition. The plan was always to protect your interests." "Stop," I interrupted, unable to stomach more lies. "I found everything, Rebecca. The hotel receipts. The private communications. The meeting with Leonard Walsh. The photos. I know exactly what you were planning and for how long. The only mistake in your perfect scheme was underestimating how much I'd learned about business while you thought I was just focused on technology." Her face paled. "Matthew, whatever you saw." 3 minutes gone, I noted calmly. "Use your remaining time wisely." She abandoned pretense then, desperation overtaking deception. "Help me fix this. Whatever you want, divorce terms, company shares back, anything. Thane is dismantling everything we built. He doesn't care about the company or the employees. Once he extracts whatever value he can, he'll disappear. I was blind not to see it before. Interesting how clearly you see his character now that his plans are affecting you personally," I observed. "Time's up, Rebecca." As I stood to leave, she grabbed my wrist. "What do I do? Tell me what to do to fix this." I looked down at her, feeling nothing but a distant pity for someone who had once been the center of my world. "Call Thane. He's the new owner now, isn't he?" With that, I walked away, leaving her alone with the consequences of her choices. The collapse of Vertex Solutions happened more quickly than anyone in the industry anticipated. Within 3 months of my departure, Thane had sold the major intellectual property assets to competitors, laid off 60% of the staff, and leveraged the remaining client contracts into a stripped-down service operation that barely resembled the company I had built. Rebecca, according to mutual acquaintances, was forced out during this contraction. The board of directors, influenced by Thane's growing control, voted to eliminate her position as part of necessary cost-cutting measures. The final insult came when Thane denied her severance, citing company financial constraints, while simultaneously awarding himself a performance bonus. Meanwhile, Reynolds Technical Solutions thrived in our deliberately understated offices. We maintained a lean operation focused on excellence rather than expansion. The team that had followed me from Vertex formed a cohesive unit with shared values and purpose. We implemented profit sharing and transparent management practices that created genuine ownership culture without the empty promises of corporate climbers. Westbrook Industries expanded their contract after our first successful quarter, impressed by our responsiveness and technical precision. Connor Williams became not just a client, but a valued advisor, occasionally joining our strategy sessions to provide the client perspective on proposed innovations. "You've built something special here, Matthew," he commented 6 months into our new relationship. "There's an authenticity to this operation that was getting lost at Vertex toward the end." The personal rebuilding proved more challenging than the professional. Betrayal at such a fundamental level creates wounds that don't heal cleanly or quickly. I continued therapy with Dr. Klein, working through the complicated grief of losing both a spouse and a business identity simultaneously. Betrayal trauma disrupts your basic understanding of reality, Dr. Klein explained during one particularly difficult session. The narrative you believed about your life has been revealed as partially false. Rebuilding means creating a new narrative that incorporates this painful truth while not allowing it to define your entire story. This process involved confronting painful questions. How had I missed the signs? Could I trust my judgment in future relationships? Was I somehow responsible for what happened? Through guided reflection, I gradually separated Rebecca's choices from my self-worth, recognizing that her betrayal revealed her character, not mine. Physical transformation became part of my healing journey. I established a morning routine of running along the lakefront, gradually increasing from 2 painful miles to comfortable 10-mile stretches. I reformed my diet, eliminating the stress-induced takeout habits of my final months at Vertex. By the 1-year anniversary of my departure, I had lost 20 pounds of accumulated stress weight and gained significant muscle definition. The social reconstruction was gradual. Initially, I avoided industry events and social gatherings where I might encounter Rebecca or former Vertex associates. As confidence returned, I selectively reconnected with professional contacts, discovering that many had pieced together the general outline of what had occurred and held considerable respect for how I had handled the situation. Rebecca made several more attempts at contact over that first year. Each message contained some variation of the same themes. Thane had manipulated her. She regretted her choices, she wanted to explain. Each time, I maintained my boundary of no direct communication, eventually having Carlos send a formal cease and desist letter when the attempts became excessive. Through mutual connections, I learned that Rebecca had relocated to Seattle after her Vertex position was eliminated. She had apparently struggled to find comparable employment, her professional reputation damaged by the company's collapse. The last I heard, she had taken a mid-level marketing position with a retail chain, a significant step down from her previous executive role. Thane's consultancy filed for bankruptcy protection 18 months after the Vertex acquisition, following several client lawsuits alleging breach of contract and fraudulent representation. He reportedly left Chicago for Miami, leaving behind unpaid creditors and former employees with worthless promises. The lesson that emerged most clearly from this experience was the importance of building business relationships based on competence and character rather than charm and connection. At Reynolds Technical Solutions, we implemented rigorous partnership agreements with clearly defined responsibilities and limitations. All major decisions required documented approval from multiple stakeholders, preventing any single person from undermining the organization. Personally, I established clearer boundaries between my professional identity and personal relationships. I learned to value myself beyond my business achievements, and to recognize that my worth wasn't determined by someone else's loyalty or betrayal. This perspective didn't emerge overnight. It came through months of difficult internal work and gradual healing. 14 months after leaving Vertex, I unexpectedly met Olivia Chen at a cybersecurity conference in Denver. A brilliant network security specialist, she approached me after my presentation on enterprise vulnerability assessment to point out a potential enhancement to our methodology. Our professional dialogue evolved into dinner, where conversation flowed effortlessly from technical topics to personal interests. Unlike my relationship with Rebecca, which had been fueled by intense attraction and complementary business skills, my connection with Olivia developed from shared values and mutual respect. I proceeded cautiously, transparent about my past experience while not allowing it to dominate our developing relationship. Olivia had her own history of relationship disappointments that had taught her the value of patience and clear communication. We dated for 6 months before exclusivity, and another 6 before introducing significant life integration. The company continued growing selectively, adding talent and clients that aligned with our core values rather than pursuing growth for its own sake. We declined acquisition offers from larger firms, prioritizing independence and quality over fast financial returns. Our team expanded to 42 people, all chosen for both technical excellence and personal integrity. 1 year and 8 months after the collapse of my marriage and former company, I found myself in a position I couldn't have imagined during those darkest days. Reynolds Technical Solutions had established a reputation for exceptional quality and ethical business practices. My relationship with Olivia had deepened into something built on genuine trust and mutual growth. The trauma remained part of my story but no longer defined my daily experience. During a weekend hike along the North Shore with Olivia, we paused at an overlook above Lake Michigan. The vastness of the water and sky created a natural moment for reflection. "Do you ever regret not fighting harder for your old company?" she asked, knowing enough of my history to understand the significance of the question. I considered carefully before answering. "I built Vertex thinking it was the culmination of my professional journey. Losing it felt like losing my identity. But being forced to start over taught me that companies are ultimately just vehicles for creating value and expressing purpose. The real assets were the skills, relationships, and resilience that couldn't be transferred with a signature. The experience had taught me to identify red flags I had previously ignored: excessive charm without substance, inconsistencies between words and actions, boundaries that erode gradually rather than being openly negotiated. These lessons served me well in both business and personal contexts. Perhaps most importantly, I learned that recovery from betrayal isn't about pretending the wound never existed, but about ensuring it doesn't infect your future. The pain of Rebecca's deception and Thane's manipulation would always remain part of my story, but it had become instructive rather than defining. What seemed like an ending had actually been a difficult but necessary transition to something more authentic. The company I rebuilt reflected my true values rather than compromised adaptations. The relationships I formed came from genuine connection rather than projected ideals. I still occasionally heard industry updates about Rebecca or Thane through mutual connections, but these reports no longer triggered emotional turmoil. Their choices had shaped their outcomes, just as my response to their betrayal had ultimately shaped mine. Have you ever faced betrayal that completely upended your life? How did you rebuild after someone you trusted violated that trust? Drop your story in the comments below. If this journey of resilience and strategic comeback resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Remember, sometimes losing what you thought you wanted opens the door to what you actually needed all along. Thank you for listening, and until next time, take care of yourself and guard your trust wisely.